Drywall, also called plasterboard, sheetrock, or gypsum board, is a board made of layers of paper, fiberboard, or felt bonded to a gypsum plaster core. Commonly used in the construction of buildings, specifically walls and ceilings, drywall is easily installable, non-combustible, and cheap. So cheap, in fact, that around 12% of drywall per construction project is wasted. Aside from the fact that 12% is a lot of material not used, a large problem arises in the disposal of this leftover drywall. The main component, gypsum plaster, consists of calcium sulfate dihydrate, and when placed in a landfill, decomposes and is broken down by sulfate-reducing bacteria. This bacteria releases up to a quarter of the gypsum material's weight as toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. Although there are no federal rules regulating the disposal of drywall, many landfills have banned the dumping of it due to this release of toxins. And so, when designing my objects, I wanted to make sure that they were functional and didn't require too many extra materials. With a lot of time spent grinding, mixing, and drying, I was able to take this, an old piece of drywall I found in my garage, and make these. Paint, paper, and a pencil holder. The first object I made was the paper. I removed as much of the outside fiberboard layer off of the drywall as I could, and then crushed the plaster on the inside to remove more fibers. This paper went into the blender with water, and the resulting sludge was put in a large bucket. I used a frame with netting to create the sheets, and they were left up to dry in the sun. One of the reasons I wanted to make paper is because other than the tools needed, the only other material that goes into the paper is water. The second object created was paint, with a plaster on the inside serving as the base and pigment. Knowing that gypsum is used in sidewalk chalk, I was hoping that this would be easy, but I was proven wrong. I spent a lot of time trying to get the gypsum as crushed as possible, and this being my first time making paint, I wasn't sure how much acrylic medium to add. All things considered, however, I feel like it was still a partial success, and it was a cool way to use two objects at once. I knew going into the making process that I was going to try paper and paint, but I wasn't sure the third object I was going to make until I was almost finished. I wanted to stay in the art office supplies genre, and I eventually landed on a pencil holder. For this object, I used a jigsaw to cut squares out, cut the middle of those out, and then layer them until I got the height I wanted. Trying to eliminate as much extra material used, I put the cup together and finished it off with plaster and drywall tape, two things there would also be extra of at a construction site. Once dried, I sanded it and applied more plaster, then sanded it a final time, giving it a nice, smooth, almost concrete look. All in all, I really enjoyed this project and how much it made me think. I like that I was able to take a material like drywall and make something out of the leftovers of it that might end up in an office and not a landfill. Calcium sulfate dihydrate. 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 Calcium sulfate dihydrate, which is broken down by sulfate-reducing bacteria and releases toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. Calcium sulfate dihydrate. Calcium sulfate Calcium sulfate dihydrate. Drywall